The ancient station hung in the void of space like a forgotten relic of a bygone era. Its dark hull, pockmarked with meteorite scars and covered in layers of cosmic dust, reflected faint traces of starlight. No one knew who built it or why it had been abandoned so long ago. The only certainty was that it had existed before the founding of the Galactic Council, before the rise and fall of empires, and before any of the known civilizations had even taken to the stars. For centuries it had been deemed an enigma, a monument to a history no one could fully comprehend. Explorers, scientists, and even scavengers had visited it over the years, but none had uncovered anything of significance. At least, that was what the official records claimed. Dr. Solara Orien, one of the Council's leading xenoarchaeologists, stood on the observation deck of her vessel, staring at the station with a mixture of awe and trepidation. She was a tall woman, with sharp features and an unyielding gaze that betrayed her determination. Her crew often said that once she fixated on a mystery, there was no turning her attention away from it. The station, codenamed Oblivion's Cradle, had become her obsession ever since a fragment of an ancient star map hinted at its true purpose. Unlike others before her, she believed that the station was more than a mere ruin. She was convinced it held answers. Answers that could rewrite the very foundation of galactic history. As the vessel docked with the station, a low groan echoed through its ancient corridors, as if the structure itself were protesting their intrusion. Solara's team, a group of hand-picked experts, followed closely behind her. Each of them was equipped with advanced scanning tools, though they all knew that their real strength lay in Solara's instincts. She had an uncanny ability to notice what others overlooked, a skill that had earned her both admiration and envy among her peers. The air inside the station was thick with a faint metallic tang, despite the atmosphere being entirely artificial. Solara led the team through the dimly lit hallways, their footsteps echoing eerily. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings and symbols, some of which were recognizable as ancient languages, while others remained undecipherable. She ran her gloved fingers over the surface of one wall, tracing the patterns as if she could will them to reveal their secrets. "Here," she said, her voice breaking the heavy silence. She pointed to a section of the wall that seemed ordinary at first glance, but revealed faint energy signatures under the scanner's light. With a practiced motion, she pulled out a small tool and began to pry open the panel. Behind it was a hidden console, its interface glowing faintly despite the millennia that had passed since it was last used. "It's operational," said Crenvalles, her assistant and the team's tech specialist. He was a young man with a nervous disposition, but his technical expertise was second to none. He stepped forward, his fingers dancing across the console's interface as he attempted to access its systems. "Can you get us in?" Solara asked, her tone sharp but not unkind. "It's complicated," he admitted, frowning as he worked. "The encryption is unlike anything I've seen before. It's not just old, it's deliberately layered, like whoever built this didn't want anyone accessing it." "Keep at it," she said, her eyes narrowing as she studied the symbols on the console. They were vaguely familiar, a mixture of glyphs she had seen in ancient human ruins and symbols from other long-extinct civilizations. The implications made her heart race, but she forced herself to remain calm. Speculation would only cloud her judgment. Hours passed as Kren worked on bypassing the encryption. The rest of the team spread out, scanning the surrounding area for additional clues. Solara stayed by the console, her eyes fixed on the screen as if willing it to surrender its secrets. Finally, a soft chime broke the silence, and Kren let out a triumphant sigh. "I'm in," he said, stepping back to reveal a stream of data scrolling across the console. Solara leaned forward, her heart pounding as she read the first lines. The text was a mixture of multiple languages, some of which she recognized as ancient dialects of human origin. Others were completely alien, yet somehow she could intuit their meaning. The opening line sent a chill down her spine. "To those who find this, know that what you uncover is both a gift and a curse. Proceed with caution, for knowledge cannot be unlearned. The team exchanged uneasy glances, but Solera's resolve only hardened. She gestured for Crane to continue. The console responded to his commands, revealing what appeared to be a log, a comprehensive database chronicling events that spanned millions of years. As they delved deeper, it became clear that this was no ordinary archive. It was a history of the galaxy itself, written by an unknown intelligence that had observed every major event with meticulous detail. But there was something strange about the entries. While most were objective records, some seemed personal, as if the writer held a particular interest in humanity. Solara's brow furrowed as she read passages that described humanity's early space exploration, their first encounters with alien species, and their rapid rise to power. The tone of these entries was almost reverent, yet tinged with a sense of foreboding. "What is this?" Kren asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Solara didn't answer immediately. She was too engrossed in a specific entry, dated thousands of years ago, that described a pivotal moment in human history. According to the log, humanity's victory in a seemingly minor conflict had been a calculated move, orchestrated not by chance, but by design. The entry ended with a chilling note. "The humans do not act, they play." The words sent a shiver down her spine. She turned to Kryn, her expression grave. "This isn't just a history, it's a warning." Before he could respond, the console flickered, and a new message appeared on the screen. The text was in a language Solara had never seen before, yet she understood it perfectly. "To unlock the final archive, you must prove yourself worthy. The truth is not for the unprepared." Solara straightened, her mind racing. The implications of this discovery were staggering. If the database held the truth about humanity's role in the galaxy, it could change everything. But the question remained, was the galaxy ready to face that truth? And more importantly, was she? Here's the detailed version of Chapter 2 for your story. The room fell silent after the console's cryptic message appeared on the screen. Dr. Solera Orian's eyes lingered on the glowing text, her mind racing through the implications. "Prove yourself worthy." The words echoed in her thoughts like a challenge, but she knew this was more than just a test of intelligence or resolve. This was something ancient, something deliberate, and possibly something deadly. She glanced at Kren Vallis, who stood stiffly by her side, his fingers still hovering over the console controls, as if he feared that touching them again might unleash something terrible. "Don't stop," she said, her voice sharper than intended. "We've come this far. If the database thinks we're unprepared, we'll prove it wrong." Kren hesitated, his nervous energy palpable. "Dr. Orian, what if this isn't just a test? What if it's a trap?" She narrowed her eyes at him, the steel in her gaze unwavering. "Then we'll deal with it." "Keep working." He exhaled slowly, nodding as he resumed his task. The console responded with a series of low hums, its ancient systems flickering to life in a way that felt almost alive. Solera couldn't shake the feeling that the station itself was watching them, observing their every move like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Meanwhile, the rest of the team moved cautiously around the room, scanning the walls and the faint energy signatures emanating from hidden panels. Lyra Messel, the team's linguist, was crouched by a series of etched symbols on the far wall, her delicate fingers tracing the patterns with care. She was a meticulous woman, quiet and methodical, but Solara had learned to trust her instincts. If anyone could decipher the strange markings, it was Lyra. "This language," Lyra murmured, her voice barely audible over the faint hum of the console. "It's a hybrid, part human, part something else. I can't tell what, but it's as if the symbols are layered, like they're meant to convey more than one meaning at a time." "Focus on the human elements," Solara instructed without turning her gaze from the console. "If this station was designed with humans in mind, it might be the key." Lyra nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration as she continued her work. Solera felt a flicker of pride in her team. They were all experts in their respective fields, Hand-picked not just for their skills, but for their ability to adapt under pressure, and pressure was mounting. Every second they spent in the station felt like a step deeper into the unknown. Kren's voice broke the tension. "I've accessed another layer of the database," he said, his tone tinged with both excitement and dread. "There are logs here, records of galactic events dating back millions of years, but something's not right." Solara moved closer, her gaze scanning the streams of data flowing across the screen. The logs were detailed, almost obsessively so, chronicling everything from interstellar wars to diplomatic summits. But the entries that caught her attention were the ones concerning humanity. They weren't just detailed, they were personal. Descriptions of human behavior, their interactions with other species, their victories and losses. It was as if the database had been written by someone or something that knew humans intimately. "What do you mean, not right?" she asked, her tone low and measured. Kren swallowed hard. "Look at this," he said, pointing to an entry dated approximately 200 years ago. "It describes a minor skirmish between humans and an allied fleet from the Veskari system. According to this, the humans' victory wasn't accidental. It says they orchestrated the entire conflict." Solara's brow furrowed as she read the entry. The log detailed how the humans had manipulated the Veskari into attacking a human colony, knowing full well that their retaliation would cripple the Veskari fleet and destabilize their government. The level of calculation was staggering and chilling. "That's impossible," Lyra said, looking up from her work. "The Veskari conflict was documented extensively. It was a misunderstanding, not a conspiracy." "Apparently not," Kren muttered. "The database claims the humans knew exactly what they were doing. They played both sides to ensure the outcome they wanted." Solara's stomach churned as she processed the implications. If the database was correct, then humanity wasn't just a resilient species navigating the galaxy by chance. They were something far more dangerous. Strategists, manipulators, and possibly even puppet masters. But why? What was their endgame? As if sensing her thoughts, the console emitted a sharp beep, drawing their attention back to the screen. A new message appeared, written in the same hybrid language as before. Lyra stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she translated the text aloud. "Beware the architects of chaos. They move unseen, their motives hidden in plain sight. To understand them is to court madness. To oppose them is to invite annihilation." The room fell deathly silent. Solara could feel the weight of the words pressing down on her, the air thick with unspoken fears. The phrase, "architects of chaos," lingered in her mind like a poison, seeding doubts and questions she couldn't yet answer. "Dr. Orion," Kren said, his voice trembling slightly, "I don't think we should go any further. Whatever this is, it's bigger than us." Solara turned to face him, her expression unreadable. She understood his fear. She felt it too. But retreating now wasn't an option. They had come too far, uncovered too much. If the database held the truth about humanity's role in the galaxy, then it was a truth they couldn't afford to ignore. "We're not stopping," she said firmly. "Whatever this is, we need to see it through." Kren looked as though he wanted to argue but thought better of it. Instead, he returned to the console, his fingers trembling slightly as he navigated through the database. Solara watched him for a moment before turning her attention back to the room. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if reacting to their presence. She couldn't shake the feeling that the station was alive, watching. Lyra's voice broke the silence. "Dr. O'Ayan," she said, her tone urgent, "there's something you need to see." Solara crossed the room to where Lyra was standing. The linguist pointed to a series of symbols she had been decoding, her expression grim. "This isn't just a warning," Lyra said. "It's a message. It says that humanity isn't what we think it is. That they've been playing a game with us all along." Solara's blood ran cold. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but the picture they formed was one she wasn't sure she wanted to see. Humanity wasn't just another species in the galactic community. They were something else entirely, something the galaxy wasn't prepared for. And as the console emitted another sharp beep, revealing yet another layer of the database, Solara realized they were only just beginning to uncover the truth. The console's hum grew louder, filling the chamber with a low, resonant vibration that seemed to pulse through the walls. Dr. Solara Orien stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the screen as new data streamed in, lines of text and diagrams flashing by in a language that seemed to defy comprehension. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to stop, to walk away, but her mind wouldn't allow it. She had spent her life chasing answers, and now, on the brink of uncovering the truth, she couldn't turn back. Crenvalis worked furiously at the console, his fingers moving faster than Solara thought possible. His face was pale, his forehead glistening with sweat, but he didn't pause. He knew, as well as she did, that the station was no longer just a relic. It was an entity with a purpose, and that purpose was tied to humanity in ways no one had ever imagined. Behind them, Lyra Mezel continued her meticulous work on the carvings etched into the walls. Her hands moved with precision, tracing the symbols and cross-referencing them with her database, her lips moving silently as she murmured translations to herself. She was deep in concentration, oblivious to the tension that had settled over the room like a shroud. "Dr. Orien," Kren said, his voice trembling slightly, "there's something you need to see." She moved closer to him, her eyes narrowing as she read the text on the screen. It was an entry from the database, dated several hundred years into the past. The entry described an event that, on the surface, seemed insignificant, a minor trade dispute between two galactic factions. But as Solara read further, she realized it wasn't insignificant. The dispute had been carefully manipulated by human mediators, who had ensured that both factions came out of the negotiations weaker than before. "This isn't diplomacy," Solara said, her voice low and cold. "This is sabotage." Kren nodded, his expression grim. "And it's not the only instance. There are dozens of entries like this, humans inserting themselves into conflicts, negotiations, even scientific collaborations, always in ways that leave the other parties at a disadvantage." Solara's mind raced. Humanity had always been seen as a species of contradictions, both compassionate and ruthless, inventive and destructive, but this painted a picture of deliberate, calculated manipulation on a galactic scale. She struggled to reconcile the humanity she thought she knew with the one described in the database. A sudden gasp from Lyra broke her train of thought. Solara turned to see the linguist staring at the wall, her eyes wide with shock. "Dr. Orien," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I found something. You need to see this." Solara crossed the room, her boots echoing on the metallic floor. Lyra pointed to a section of the wall where the carvings had become more intricate, the symbols forming a dense, interwoven pattern that seemed almost alive. "It's a timeline," Lyra explained, her voice trembling. "A record of humanity's actions across the galaxy. But look here." She pointed to a specific section, her finger hovering over a series of symbols. "This part isn't written in past tense. It's written in present and future tenses." Solara's stomach churned as she studied the symbols. The timeline didn't just document humanity's past, it was a prediction of their future. And the predictions weren't vague or speculative. They were precise, detailing events that had yet to occur with unnerving specificity. "What does it say?" Solara asked, her voice tight. Lyra hesitated, her eyes flicking between the symbols and her notes. It says humanity will rise to dominate the galaxy, not through war or conquest, but through influence. It says they'll weave themselves into the fabric of every major civilization, shaping their cultures, their economies, their technologies. It says they'll become indispensable, until they're untouchable. Until they're untouchable. Solara felt a chill run down her spine. The implications were staggering. If the timeline was accurate, humanity wasn't just a participant in galactic affairs. They were its architects. and the rest of the galaxy was unwittingly playing along. Kren's voice cut through the silence. "Dr. Orion, there's more." She turned to see him staring at the console, his face pale. "What is it?" she asked. "The database," he began, his voice unsteady. "It's responding to us. It's adapting to our presence." Solera frowned. "What do you mean?" "Look at this," he said, pointing to the screen. The data had shifted, reorganizing itself into a format that was easier to read, as if the system was tailoring itself to their needs. But that wasn't the most alarming part. The new text was written in perfect Galactic standard, a language the database shouldn't have known. "It's communicating with us," Kren said, his voice barely above a whisper. Solara's mind raced. The station's intelligence was far more advanced than she had anticipated. It wasn't just a repository of information. It was alive, aware, and actively engaging with them. The thought both fascinated and terrified her. The new text on the screen was simple, yet chilling in its clarity. "You seek the truth. Are you prepared to face it?" Solera felt a lump form in her throat. She glanced at Kren, whose hands were trembling, and then at Lyra, who was still staring at the wall with a look of dawning horror. She knew what she had to do, but the weight of the decision pressed heavily on her. "Yes," she said aloud, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "We're ready." The console hummed louder, the vibrations growing stronger as the room seemed to come alive. The symbols on the walls began to glow faintly, their light pulsating in time with the hum. The air grew thick, charged with energy, as if the station itself was responding to her words. And then, without warning, the screen went dark. For a moment, the room was silent, save for the sound of their breathing. Then the console lit up again, displaying a single line of text. "Prepare yourselves. The truth will change everything." Solara took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. Whatever lay ahead, she knew there was no turning back. The truth was waiting, and she was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. The moment the console displayed its final message, the room plunged into a tense, suffocating silence. Dr. Sila Rorien stood at the center of the chamber, her body rigid, her mind racing with possibilities. She was determined to uncover the truth, but for the first time since stepping onto the station, a gnawing sense of dread began to creep into her thoughts. The station was no longer just an artifact of ancient civilizations. It was an active force, and now it had made a direct connection to them. Kren Vallis, his face pale and drawn, hovered near the console. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the controls, desperate to understand what would come next. He glanced at Solara, his voice cracking as he spoke. "Dr. Orion, what if we've already gone too far? What if the warning wasn't just for us? It was for the galaxy." Solara turned her sharp gaze on him, her voice firm but not unkind. "We can't stop now, Kren. If this database holds the truth about humanity's role in the galaxy, we have a responsibility to uncover it. You know that as well as I do. But what if we're not ready for that truth?" Kren replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if it's not just knowledge? What if it's a catalyst?" Before Solara could answer, a faint vibration ran through the floor, growing steadily stronger until it became a low rumble. The team exchanged uneasy glances as the symbols on the walls began to glow more intensely, their light pulsating in rhythm with the vibrations. Lyra Mazel, still studying the carvings, looked up sharply, her expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. "Something's happening," Lyra said, her voice tense. "The station. It's reacting to us." Solara stepped closer to the console, her heart pounding. The screen flickered and new lines of text appeared, scrolling rapidly across the interface. The language was a mix of Galactic Standard and the hybrid dialect they had seen earlier, but it was unmistakably a direct communication. "Truth unlocked. Commencing sequence." Kren's fingers froze over the console as the room's vibrations intensified. "What sequence? What's it talking about?" Before anyone could answer, the chamber was flooded with light. The symbols on the walls projected beams that converged in the center of the room, forming a three-dimensional hologram. It was an intricate web of interconnected points, each one representing a different event, civilization, or technological breakthrough. At the center of the web was a single glowing point, pulsing with a steady, almost hypnotic rhythm. "Is that Earth?" Lyra asked, her voice barely audible. Solara nodded, her eyes locked on the hologram. The central point was unmistakably a representation of Earth, surrounded by threads that extended to every corner of the galaxy. The web was a visual representation of humanity's influence, and the sheer scope of it was staggering. "It's a network," Solara murmured, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and dread. "A map of human interactions with the galaxy, every connection, every action, every decision. They're all here." As she spoke, the hologram shifted, zooming in on specific events. Each one played out like a recording, showing moments in galactic history where humanity had been involved. A minor trade agreement between two alien factions, manipulated by human mediators to favor Earth's interests. A technological breakthrough that had been shared with an allied species, only to reveal built-in dependencies on human infrastructure. A war that had been avoided not through diplomacy, but through a calculated show of strength that left humanity's enemies too intimidated to act. Lyra stepped closer to the hologram, her eyes wide with disbelief. This isn't diplomacy or cooperation. This is control. Subtle, calculated control. Kren shook his head, his voice rising in panic. "This is insane! How could humanity have orchestrated all of this? It doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," Solara said, her tone grim. "If the database is correct, humanity has been playing a game with the galaxy for centuries, maybe even millennia. Every move they've made has been deliberate, designed to position themselves as the ultimate power. But why?" Kren demanded, his voice trembling. "Why would they do this? What's their endgame?" Before Solara could respond, the hologram shifted again. This time, it displayed a series of projections, scenarios that detailed potential futures for the galaxy. In each one, humanity was at the center, its influence growing until it was untouchable. The projections showed alliances crumbling, civilizations falling into dependence on human technology, and entire star systems being reshaped to serve humanity's needs. "It's not just about power," Solara said softly, her voice heavy with realization. "It's about survival. Humanity isn't trying to dominate the galaxy. They're trying to ensure their own existence. By embedding themselves into every aspect of galactic life, they've made themselves indispensable. If the galaxy turns on them, it collapses." Kren's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "This isn't survival. This is madness." The console beeped, drawing their attention back to the screen. A new message appeared, written in bold, glowing text. "Do you understand now? The game is not about winning. It's about never losing." Solara's heart sank as the weight of the message settled over her. The database wasn't just a record of humanity's actions. It was a manifesto, a blueprint for their survival, written with cold, unflinching logic. She felt a deep unease, a sense that they had uncovered something that was never meant to be seen. Lyra stepped back from the hologram, her expression haunted. "If this gets out, if the Council finds out what humanity has been doing," Solara cut her off, her voice sharp. "We can't let it get out, not yet. The galaxy isn't ready for this. If the other civilizations find out that humanity has been manipulating them, it could spark a war that no one can win. But keeping it a secret makes us complicit," Lyra protested, her voice trembling. "How can we justify that?" "We justify it by preventing chaos," Solara said firmly. "This isn't about morality, it's about survival. Humanity's survival. The galaxy's survival. If we release this information, we'll tear everything apart." Kren looked at her, his expression filled with doubt. "And what happens if humanity finds out we know?" Solara didn't answer immediately. She stared at the hologram, her mind racing with possibilities. Finally she spoke, her voice cold and resolute. "Then we make sure they never find out." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and Solara knew there was no turning back. The truth had been uncovered, but it was a truth the galaxy might never be ready to face. And as the station's vibrations subsided and the hologram faded, she realized that the real challenge wasn't uncovering the truth, it was deciding what to do with it. The room was silent again, save for the faint hum of the console. The glow of the hologram had faded, but the weight of its revelations hung heavily in the air. Dr. Solara Oyen stood motionless, her hands clenched at her sides as her mind raced. She had uncovered the truth, but the question of what to do next loomed over her like a shadow. The station had given her a choice, one that would define not only her own future, but potentially the fate of the galaxy itself. Kren Vallis broke the silence, his voice trembling. "Dr. Orion, what do we do now? If we leave this station without doing something, anything, we'll carry this knowledge with us forever. We can't just walk away from this." Solara turned to him, her gaze steely but filled with an unspoken burden. "We won't walk away, Kren, but we have to be careful. If this information gets into the wrong hands, it could destroy everything." Kren looked unconvinced. He ran a hand through his hair, his movements erratic. "But who decides what's right or wrong here? Us? How do we even begin to make that call?" Lyra Mezel, who had been standing silently by the wall, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but firm. "This isn't just about us. The galaxy deserves to know the truth, even if it's not ready for it. Hiding this only makes us complicit in humanity's game." Solara turned her sharp gaze to Lyra. "And if the galaxy finds out, what do you think will happen? Civilizations will turn on humanity. Wars will break out. Wars the galaxy isn't prepared to fight. Is that what you want, Lyra? To trade one kind of chaos for another?" Lyra hesitated, her resolve faltering under Solara's scrutiny. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "But hiding the truth feels wrong." Before Solara could respond, the console emitted a sharp beep. All eyes turned to the screen as new text appeared, written in the same hybrid language as before. "The truth cannot be undone. It is a fire that consumes all in its path. Choose wisely." The message was simple, but its implications were anything but. The station was giving them one last chance to decide, one final moment to choose between revelation and secrecy. Solara felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her, threatening to crush her. "Dr. Orion," Kren said cautiously, "what if the station doesn't intend for us to leave? What if it's testing us to see if we're worthy of carrying this knowledge?" Solara frowned, the thought sending a chill down her spine. "What are you saying, Kren? That if we make the wrong choice, the station will, what, kill us?" "It's possible," Kren said, his voice hesitant. "The station is clearly more advanced than anything we've encountered. It might have the capability to neutralize threats." Solara clenched her jaw. She didn't like the idea of being at the mercy of an ancient intelligence, but she couldn't ignore the possibility. "Then we make the right choice," she said firmly. "Whatever that is." The console beeped again and the hologram reappeared. This time it displayed a single thread of the web, a timeline that extended far into the future. The thread showed humanity continuing its ascent, weaving itself deeper into the fabric of galactic life. At first the projections were optimistic, humanity working alongside other civilizations, advancing technology, and fostering peace. But as the timeline progressed, the threads darkened, alliances broke down, conflicts erupted, civilizations crumbled under the weight of humanity's influence. The final projection was a void, a black, empty expanse that stretched infinitely. No stars, no civilizations, no life, just nothingness. Lyra's voice trembled as she spoke. Is this what happens if humanity succeeds?" Kren shook his head, his expression grim. "No. This is what happens if humanity goes unchecked." Solara's mind raced. The timeline was a warning, but it wasn't clear what the warning was meant to convey. Was it a plea to stop humanity or a challenge to guide them toward a better path? She felt a surge of frustration. The station was giving them pieces of the puzzle, but refusing to show the full picture. She turned back to the console, her voice sharp. "What do you want us to do?" she demanded, addressing the station itself. "What's the point of showing us this if you won't give us a clear answer?" The console's hum grew louder, and new text appeared on the screen. "The answer is not mine to give, it is yours to find." Solara stared at the words, her frustration boiling over. She felt as though the station was taunting her, dangling the truth just out of reach. But she couldn't afford to let her emotions cloud her judgment. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly. "We can't stop humanity," she said finally, her voice steady. "But we can guide them. If this station is a record of their actions, it can also be a tool, a way to hold them accountable. We'll take what we've learned here and use it to ensure humanity doesn't destroy the galaxy." Kren and Lyra exchanged uncertain glances, but neither of them objected. They knew Silar was right. The truth was a weapon, and like any weapon, it had to be wielded carefully. The console emitted one final beep, and the hologram faded. The room grew still, the vibrations subsiding until there was only silence. Solara stepped back from the console, her heart heavy, but her resolve firm. "We're done here," she said, her voice resolute. "Let's leave before the station decides we've overstayed our welcome." The team moved quickly, gathering their equipment and making their way back to the ship. As they exited the station, Solara cast one last glance over her shoulder. The ancient structure loomed in the darkness, its purpose fulfilled. Or perhaps just beginning. Back on the ship, as the station receded into the void, Solara sat in the command chair, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. She had uncovered the truth, but the hardest part was still to come. She would have to decide how to use that truth, knowing that every choice carried the weight of the galaxy. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, Solara stared out the viewport, her reflection staring back at her. The words of the station echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of the burden she now carried. The truth is a fire, use it wisely.